My son had been traveling for work for at least 2 years. That's what my daughter-in-law told me. Laura was always attentive, sometimes almost too attentive. But one Saturday morning at the farmer's market, a delivery driver pressed a package into my hands and quietly asked, "Are you Ethan's father?" When I nodded, he looked around nervously and said, "I can't hold on to this anymore. You need to watch it alone." I drove straight home and opened it at my kitchen table. What I found inside made the room tilt. Before I tell you what was in that package, I need to know where you're watching from right now and what time it is where you are. The Saturday morning farmer's market in Riverside, Oregon had been my ritual for decades. At 63, I found comfort in familiar rhythms, choosing tomatoes from Martha's stand, trading weather talk with neighbors who'd known me since Margaret and I bought the ranch 40 years ago. The October air had that crisp edge that always reminded me of easier times. My name is William Carter, and for 3 years, 2 months, and 8 days, I'd been telling everyone that my son Ethan was thriving overseas in his consulting career. Dubai, Singapore, Tokyo. Laura explained it smoothly whenever anyone asked, calling it the modern professional life, always with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I wanted to believe her, I truly did. I was inspecting late-season apples when I felt eyes on me. "Mr. Carter." The voice belonged to a man in his 30s wearing a delivery uniform, his face pale. His hand shook as he held out a package wrapped in brown paper. "You're Ethan Carter's father." I set down my basket. "I am. Do I know you?" He shook his head. "No, sir. My name is Daniel Brooks." He scanned the crowded market like someone expecting trouble. "I've been making deliveries for someone, and I saw your son, and I—" His voice dropped to a whisper. "I can't keep this anymore. The truth matters, Mr. Carter. Whatever you've been told, the truth matters." He pushed the package into my hands with sudden urgency, then stepped back. "I'm sorry. I tried to do the right thing, but I have a family. I can't." He vanished into the crowd before I could ask another question. I made it to my truck before my hands started shaking. The package sat on the passenger seat, plain brown paper hiding whatever had driven a stranger to me with fear in his eyes. I drove the 10 miles home on autopilot, my thoughts racing. The ranch sat at the end of a long gravel drive, surrounded by the 30 acres Margaret and I had built our life on. After she passed 2 years ago, the silence had settled into every corner of the house. I placed the package on the kitchen table, the same oak surface where we'd shared countless meals, and forced my hands to steady. Inside was a USB drive, a folded letter, and a photograph that stopped my heart. The photo showed Ethan, unmistakably my son, though thinner, the hollows in his cheeks deeper, his eyes carrying a haunted look I'd never seen. He stood in front of a concrete wall holding a newspaper. The date was visible, April 14th of this year, 6 months ago. But it wasn't just his appearance that chilled me. It was the setting, the sterile background, the way he seemed to be standing there because he was told to. This wasn't a business trip. This wasn't Dubai or Singapore. The letter began simply, "Mr. Carter, my name is Daniel Brooks. I work for Northline Logistics. For the past year, I've been making deliveries to a facility outside Portland on behalf of your daughter-in-law." I looked again at the photograph, then at the USB drive on the table like a loaded weapon. Ethan wasn't overseas. He hadn't left Oregon at all. I stared at the photo for a long moment before reaching for the drive. Margaret's old laptop sat in the corner of the kitchen. She'd given it to me 3 years ago, insisting I learn email so I could stay in touch with Ethan overseas. The irony wasn't lost on me as I turned it on and plugged in the drive. 6 video files appeared, each marked with dates spanning 14 months. I opened the first. My kitchen appeared on the screen, filmed from near the ceiling, the timestamp showing a Tuesday afternoon last November. I watched Laura enter through the back door with her key, go straight to the cabinet where I kept financial documents, and photograph page after page with her phone. 4 minutes later, she was gone. I'd been at book club that day. The second video showed Margaret's study, Laura rifling through files my wife had carefully organized, photographing tax returns and property deeds. The third showed the basement, Laura digging through storage boxes I hadn't touched since Margaret passed. Each clip showed the same pattern, Laura moving through my home with purpose, documenting anything tied to the ranch or our assets. The shock slowly hardened into something colder. I set the videos aside and unfolded Daniel Brooks's letter completely. His handwriting was tight and urgent. He explained that for the past year, he'd been making deliveries to a secured facility outside Portland for my daughter-in-law. Good money, no questions asked. 3 weeks earlier, during a delivery, he'd seen my son through a window. Ethan had looked at him with a recognition that wasn't of a person, but of the outside world itself, like someone trapped catching a glimpse of daylight. Daniel wrote about asking questions, following threads, realizing what was really happening. Ethan hadn't been traveling. He'd been institutionalized the entire time. He wrote that he had a family, that he'd been warned not to interfere, but that my son needed help and someone had to know. I opened the final file on the USB drive. It was a medical report, clinical and exact. Patient, Ethan James Carter. Facility, Willow Ridge Care Facility, Riverside Drive, Portland. Diagnosis, severe traumatic brain injury, cognitive impairment, requiring ongoing supervision. Legal guardian, Laura Carter. Visiting restrictions, guardian approval required. The admission date froze me in place. 3 years, 2 months, and 9 days ago. One day after Ethan was supposedly sent on his first assignment to Dubai. While I'd been proudly telling neighbors my son was building an international career, his wife had taken legal guardianship and locked him inside a care facility less than an hour from my ranch, close enough that I could have driven there any Saturday after the farmer's market. For 3 years, she'd been combing through my home, photographing documents, searching for something. I sat in the dim kitchen, Margaret's laptop glowing in front of me, and finally understood the scale of the lie. My son hadn't been abroad. He'd been confined, his life quietly erased, while his wife maintained a flawless story and hunted through my house to finish whatever plan she'd started. Tomorrow, I'd see Laura when she dropped off the kids. Tomorrow, I'd have to look her in the eye and act like I knew nothing. My hands were steady now. Fear had burned itself out, leaving behind something colder and clearer. The next morning, my phone buzzed. "William, can you watch Ivy and Knox today? Something came up." I typed back without hesitation. "Of course, happy to have them." Within the hour, my grandchildren burst through the door. Knox, 6, wrapped himself around my legs, gripping the old toy truck that had once been Ethan's. Ivy, 8, hung back, already too observant, studying my face with the dark, thoughtful eyes she'd inherited from her father. "Who wants to make cookies?" I guided them into the kitchen where Margaret had once taught Ethan how to bake. We mixed flour and sugar. Knox talked non-stop, but Ivy stayed quiet, measuring carefully. "Grandpa," she said softly, "when is Daddy coming home?" The wooden spoon froze in my hand. I saw the photograph again, Ethan's thinner face, the emptiness in his eyes. 3 years stolen, while I believed a lie. "Your daddy loves you very much," I said gently. "No matter where he is, that never changes." "Mom says he's too busy to call," Knox said, his excitement fading. "Did Daddy forget us?" I knelt and pulled them both close. "Never. Your father would never forget you. I promise." Ivy searched my face. "You promise?" "I promise I'll find out what's happening with your daddy." After lunch, they played outside while I watched from the porch. Knox raced through the tall grass with his truck. Ivy sat beneath Margaret's apple tree, drawing in her notebook. When she showed me later, it was our family in simple stick figures, holding hands, except the one labeled Daddy stood apart, divided by a dark line. Laura arrived at 6, perfectly composed in designer jeans and a soft sweater. "Thank you so much, William. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Any time," I said evenly. "They're good kids." She lingered, and I recognized the shift, the careful setup for what she really wanted. "By the way, I've been helping Ethan sort through some investment questions remotely. I thought Margaret might have kept copies of financial documents, property records, maybe trust papers. You two were always so organized." There it was, the real reason she needed me today. I kept my expression neutral. "I'm not sure what I have, but I can look." Relief flickered across her face. "That would be wonderful. No rush. Maybe I could come by next week and we could go through things together." "Sure," I said. After she left with the kids, I stood alone in my kitchen as the truth settled in. She'd searched my home for 3 years and still hadn't found what she needed. Now she was asking directly, and I just agreed to help. But there was one place she didn't know about, one place I'd nearly forgotten. Margaret had always been meticulous. After she passed, I'd found a small key in her desk drawer with a tag reading Riverside Community Bank, Box 247. I'd set it aside then, too buried in grief to face paperwork. Tomorrow I'd go to the bank and see what my wife had hidden away. Whatever Laura was searching for, Margaret had made sure it stayed out of reach. Monday morning came too quickly. I stood outside Riverside Community Bank at 9 sharp, the small key clenched in my hand. The clerk smiled politely as I approached. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. How can I help you?" "I need access to my late wife's safety deposit box." I slid the key and my ID across the counter. She checked the system, nodded, and led me through the vault into a private room. The metal box was heavier than I expected when she set it down and left me alone. Inside were a legal document labeled Carter Family Trust, confidential, a sealed envelope marked for William, and copies of property deeds and financial records. I opened the envelope first. Margaret's familiar handwriting filled the pages, dated 6 months before she died. "My dearest William, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I pray you never needed to find this. But I've learned to trust my instincts, and my instincts about Laura have troubled me for years. Small lies at first, money that never quite matched her income, the way she watched Ethan when she thought no one noticed, not with love, but calculation. I created this trust without telling anyone, except Chase Holt. It protects Ethan and the children. If anything happens to Ethan, if Laura tries to control his assets or ours, this document stops her. The ranch, the land, everything remains in trust for Ethan and the kids, managed by you. She gets nothing. Fight for our son. Don't trust easy answers. You're stronger than you think. All my love, Margaret." I sat there, the letter shaking in my hands, something breaking open in my chest. My wife had known. Somehow she'd sensed the danger and tried to protect us from beyond the grave. 20 minutes later, I was standing in Chase Holt's office downtown. The old lawyer looked up, concern settling into his face as he took one look at me. "William," he said quietly, "what's happened?" I told him everything. The package from Daniel Brooks, the videos, the medical report showing Ethan confined at Willow Ridge under Laura's guardianship, her methodical search of my home. I laid it all out. Chase listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each detail. "Margaret came to me 3 years ago," he said at last, pulling a file from his cabinet, "right after her diagnosis. She was worried about something, but wouldn't say exactly what." He tapped the folder. "This trust is ironclad, William. It overrides everything. Laura has no access to your assets or Ethan's inheritance." "Can she contest it?" I asked. "She can try, but Margaret was of sound mind when she created it. The medical records prove that." He hesitated, then chose his words carefully. "If what you're saying is true, if Laura obtained guardianship through fraud, she's committed multiple felonies. But we need stronger evidence than videos and suspicion. We need proof from inside that facility." He opened his desk drawer and slid a business card across the desk. "Ford Steele, former FBI. If anyone can get what we need, it's him." I studied the card. "I'll call him." Chase's voice hardened. "Be careful. A journalist started investigating facilities like Willow Ridge 6 months ago. She published one article on guardianship abuse. It vanished from the site within 48 hours. 2 weeks later, she was killed in a hit and run. Case was never solved." He pushed the card closer. "If anyone can get proof, it's Ford. But these people are dangerous." That evening, Ford Steele arrived at my ranch after dark, moving with the calm precision of someone used to threat. He swept the property for surveillance before knocking, a precaution that made Chase's warning feel suddenly real. "No bugs I can find," he said, "but assume you're being watched anyway." Inside, I showed him everything. The videos, the report, Daniel's letter. His face didn't change until I mentioned Ethan at Willow Ridge. "This is bigger than family fraud," he said flatly. "I knew Quinn Drake. She was careful. She published one piece on guardianship exploitation before it disappeared. 2 weeks later, she was dead on I-5. Driver never found." He met my eyes. "If they killed a reporter, they won't hesitate with a rancher." Ford laid out what he called operational security. Cash only. No phone conversations about the case. Innocent explanations for anything unusual. Trust no one. "I'll start at Willow Ridge," he said. "I'll pose as a relative looking to place someone. Get inside. assess the situation. But this takes time, and if they're watching you, every move matters. After he left, I sat alone in the dark kitchen, realizing I wasn't just fighting Laura anymore. I was up against something far larger and far more ruthless. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Stop asking questions about Ethan Carter. This is your only warning. I forwarded it to Ford without replying. That afternoon, Laura showed up unannounced, perfectly composed in a tailored blazer. I was nearby, she said lightly. I found some forms, just medical record authorizations for Ethan's care coordination. Could you sign here? I took the papers without opening them. I'll have Chase review these. Her smile tightened. Your lawyer? I don't sign anything without legal review. That's just common sense. Something flashed across her face, calculation, maybe anger, before the mask returned. Of course. Take your time. After she left, I called Chase and sent him scans of the paperwork. 20 minutes later, he called back. Don't sign that. It gives her attorneys access to all your medical records, including psychiatric evaluations. They could cherry-pick anything to claim incompetence. My stomach dropped. She's building a case against me. It's worse, he said. She's already moving. Wednesday morning at 9:15, a courier delivered an official document. Petition for competency evaluation. Laura Carter requested the court determine that William Carter was unable to manage his affairs due to increasing forgetfulness, missed appointments, paranoid accusations against family members, and confusion about dates and events. Attached were statements from Dr. Sage Cross, twisting my grief over Margaret into signs of decline. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks from today. If she won, Laura would control everything. My ranch, my finances, even my ability to fight for Ethan. She'd make me exactly what she'd made my son, a prisoner under her control. I called Chase immediately. She's trying to do to me what she did to Ethan. His voice was grim. She's moving faster than I expected. We need solid, irrefutable proof that Ethan's guardianship is fraudulent, and we need it within 3 weeks. The days blurred into preparation and dread. Then, 10 days before the hearing, Ford called at dawn. I found someone inside, he said. She's willing to talk. By 6 that morning, a woman in her early 30s stood in my kitchen, dark circles under her eyes, a USB drive clenched in her hand. Her name was Paige North. She'd worked at Willow Ridge for 4 years as a registered nurse until 2 weeks ago, when her conscience finally broke. I can't testify, she said immediately. I have a daughter. I saw what happened to that reporter, but I made copies before I left. She slid the drive across the table, like it burned. Ethan Carter is listed as severe traumatic brain injury with diminished capacity, but his chart doesn't support that. Cognitive assessments show normal function. Vitals are stable. He communicates clearly when we're allowed to interact, which isn't often. My hand shook as I picked up the drive. Why the restrictions? Dr. Flynn West signs off on everything Laura requests. Minimal contact, no outside calls, limited recreation. Billing runs $18,500 a month, but the actual care? She shook her head. Maybe $5,000. The rest disappears into administrative fees. She pulled out printed emails, Laura's name in the header. Dr. West's in reply. Restrictions remain necessary given guardianship circumstances. Family contact inadvisable. Paige looked at me. There are dozens of cases like Ethan. People who could go home. Families who don't even know where they are. It's a system, Mr. Carter, and your son got trapped in it. Ford walked her out. When Ford returned, he handed me a second set of materials. Photographs he'd taken during a midnight sweep of Willow Ridge's exterior, floor layouts, and staff shift rotations. Laura's hosting a video call tonight, he said. 6 o'clock. You, Ethan, and the kids. She thinks it'll help her image for the competency hearing, the devoted daughter-in-law keeping family ties intact. But we're going to watch your son very closely. That evening, Laura's living room felt like a stage set. Ivy and Knox sat beside me on the couch, scrubbed clean and nervous. The laptop screen flickered. Then Ethan appeared. He looked thinner than in Daniel's photograph, worn, but his eyes were clear. Hi, Dad, he said, his voice rough but steady. Ivy and Knox burst into excited chatter. Ethan smiled, Asked about school, about the ranch. Every answer was lucid, appropriate, present. Then his gaze fixed on mine. I noticed the deliberate blink, the subtle tap of his fingers against his chest, the smallest expression that said, "I'm here. I'm aware. I need you to see me." Laura hovered just outside the frame, watching. Ethan kept his tone light with the kids, but his eyes never left mine. When the call ended, I sat in the silence of Laura's house and understood the truth. My son wasn't sick. He was trapped. Sunday night, Chase called. "Daniel Brooks is dead," he said quietly. "Single vehicle accident on Highway 26, 3 days after he delivered the package. Police say driver fatigue." I knew better. The hearing was now 9 days away. We had our evidence, but I also understood the price of telling the truth and how far someone would go to bury it. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and gray. I drove to Portland alone, leaving the ranch before sunrise, the weight of Margaret's trust and Daniel's sacrifice pressing against my chest. Multnomah County Courthouse rose from the city blocks like a monument to judgment. Inside, the wood-paneled courtroom felt designed to intimidate. High ceilings, harsh lights, the judge's bench elevated like an altar. Laura sat across the aisle with 3 attorneys flanking her. Blair Storm, her lead counsel, looked sharp and expensive in a charcoal suit. Laura wore navy blue, her expression carefully arranged into concern, the devoted daughter-in-law forced into difficult choices. I felt sick. At 9 sharp, we rose for Judge Grace Mills. Early 60s, gray hair pulled back, eyes that missed nothing. Her reputation preceded her, fair but intolerant of theatrics. Blair opened with practiced sympathy. "Your Honor, we're here due to serious concerns about William Carter's declining mental capacity. In recent months, Mr. Carter has shown forgetfulness, missed appointments, and paranoid accusations against his daughter-in-law. He claims his son, who receives necessary care for traumatic brain injury, is being held captive. He alleges his daughter-in-law broke into his home. These are not the actions of someone capable of managing a 30-acre ranch and substantial assets." She presented doctor's notes and incident reports. I listened as every truth I'd uncovered was twisted into proof of delusion, each word cutting deeper. Chase stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Carter is not incompetent. He uncovered a criminal conspiracy, and Ms. Carter is attempting to silence him the same way she silenced his son." "Objection," Blair snapped. Judge Mills raised a hand. "I'll allow it. Continue, Mr. Holt." Chase set up his laptop calmly. "Your Honor, these are security recordings from Mr. Carter's residence." The first video filled the screen, time-stamped last November. Laura appeared, using her own key while I was away, moving straight to the file cabinet in Margaret's old office, photographing documents with methodical precision. The courtroom murmured. A second video followed. Different date, same behavior. Then a third, a fourth, a sixth, spanning 14 months. Each time I left the property, Laura entered and searched. Color drained from her face. Blair scrambled. "Your Honor, Ms. Carter had a key. She was checking on her father-in-law's welfare. Welfare checks don't include photographing financial records and rifling through private papers," Chase replied. "This was a calculated intrusion to locate something specific." He turned to the bench. "The truth is, Ethan Carter is not incapacitated. His guardianship was obtained through fraud. We have medical evidence from facility staff that he's fully lucid and has been trying to contact his family for months. We request Ethan Carter be brought before this court for an independent psychiatric evaluation." Blair leapt to her feet. "Objection. This is outside the scope. Transporting Mr. Carter would cause psychological trauma." Judge Mills's gavel struck once. "Ms. Storm, if Mr. Carter is as impaired as you claim, an evaluation will confirm it. If he's not, then we have serious questions about this guardianship." She looked to the bailiff. "I'm ordering Ethan Carter brought to this courthouse immediately for evaluation by a court-appointed psychiatrist. We will reconvene at 2 p.m. The gavel rang again. For a split second, Laura's composure cracked as she leaned toward her lawyers, whispering urgently. In 2 hours, my son would walk through that courtroom door, and the truth would finally step into the light. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doors opened. They wheeled Ethan in a chair he didn't need, Laura's final performance. He looked thin, exhausted, but his eyes found mine instantly, blazing with recognition and fierce hope. I hadn't seen my son in 3 years, 2 months, and 8 days. The man before me wasn't the broken shadow Laura had described. He was confined, but he was present. Judge Mills nodded to the bailiff. "Bring in Dr. Stone." Dr. Wade Stone, the court-appointed psychiatrist, took the stand with the calm authority of someone grounded in facts, not manipulation. "Your Honor, I've completed my evaluation of Ethan Carter. Mr. Carter is fully lucid. He understands his circumstances, communicates clearly, and shows no signs of the impairment described in facility records. He does not require a guardian and should be allowed to speak for himself. In my professional opinion, his continued institutionalization has no medical basis." The courtroom erupted. Judge Mills's gavel cracked down once. Blair tried to object, but the judge cut her off. "Dr. Stone's credentials are impeccable. Mr. Carter, do you understand why you're here?" Ethan's voice was rough from disuse, but steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I understand my wife petitioned for guardianship, claiming I was incompetent. I understand she's now trying to do the same to my father, and I understand it's time to tell the truth." Judge Mills inclined her head. "Then please do." Ethan drew a breath, gathering strength from somewhere deep. 3 years ago, my wife and I argued about money. My mother created a trust with strict limits on access. Laura wanted me to break those restrictions and withdraw the principal immediately for investments. I refused. She became angry. We were at the top of the stairs in our house. She pushed me. His voice stayed factual. I fell. I woke up in the hospital with a head injury, confused. By the time I was clear-headed enough to understand what happened, she'd secured guardianship. She told doctors I was delusional and dangerous. I tried to explain, but Dr. Flynn West dismissed it as trauma-related fabrication. Every message I tried to send was monitored or blocked. I've been imprisoned for 3 years, Your Honor, locked away while my wife drained my accounts and searched my father's home for documents that would give her control of everything. Blair shot to her feet. This is textbook false memory from brain trauma. Chase stood calmly. Your Honor, there's one more piece of evidence. He nodded to Ford. The recording played, a conversation from the courthouse hallway 90 minutes earlier during recess, when Laura thought no one else was listening. You should have signed what I needed, William. You should have stayed confused and compliant. Ethan was never ambitious enough. When he fell down those stairs, I saw an opportunity. Protect my children's inheritance and control everything. You forced me into steps I didn't want to take. Oregon's one-party consent law made the recording legal. Ford had been part of the conversation, standing beside me the entire time. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Mills's face hardened. I've heard enough. Ethan Carter's guardianship is terminated effective immediately. Ms. Carter's petition regarding William Carter is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Carter will be discharged from Willow Ridge today. I am ordering an immediate investigation into Ms. Carter for guardianship fraud, financial exploitation, and possible attempted homicide. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck like thunder. Laura's face drained of color. That evening, she was arrested at her home, the beginning of justice, not yet the end. 6 months after the trial, Ethan and the kids moved back to the ranch. The house that felt hollow after Margaret died brimmed with life again, children's laughter, my son's voice reading bedtime stories, the sound of healing. What followed came swiftly and thoroughly. Laura was convicted on multiple counts: guardianship fraud, financial exploitation, conspiracy, sentenced to 15 years with no early parole. The Willow Ridge investigation spread quickly. Dr. Flynn West and 3 staff members were arrested for conspiracy. 12 other patients were identified in similar situations, people who could have gone home, lives stolen and hidden behind coded doors. All freed guardianships were reviewed. The facility was permanently closed. Paige North received immunity in exchange for her testimony and now works for a guardianship reform advocacy group. Daniel Brooks' family learned the truth about his heroic actions. I visited them personally to make sure they knew their husband and father had saved Ethan's life. Without Dean's courage that Saturday morning at the market, my son would still be imprisoned. We owe him everything. Quinn Drake's death investigation was reopened, though no charges have been filed yet. Ethan returned home 3 days after the hearing. Ivy and Knox followed a week later, after family therapy. The transition was hardest on the children, their mother in prison, their father someone they barely remembered, and their grandfather, who had seemed old, suddenly revealed as a fierce protector. Gradually, healing came. Ethan took over ranch work, mending fences and tending cattle, tasks his body remembered even while his mind wrestled with 3 lost years. Therapy helped us all, rebuilding relationships through small, everyday moments, pancake breakfasts, homework, bedtime stories. Ivy struggled more, angry at her mother, grieving the future she'd imagined. Knox proved resilient, younger, and adaptable. Family dinners every night, passing dishes, sharing the day, slowly stitched together what Laura had tried to tear apart. One autumn evening, 6 months later, I sat on the porch watching the sunset spill across the fields. Ethan sat beside me with Knox in his lap, Ivy leaning against my chair. Fireflies began their dance. "I never thanked you properly, Ethan," I said quietly, "for not giving up, for believing when you couldn't even speak to me." I squeezed my son's shoulder. "You're my boy." Giving up was never an option. Inside, Margaret's photo stood on the mantel beside her framed letter. Words I'd memorized. "Fight for our son. You're stronger than you think. Not through violence, wealth, or power, but by refusing to accept comfortable lies, trusting instinct, and taking one step at a time when everything seemed impossible." Truth had won. Justice had come, not loud, not celebrated in newspapers, but here, in my son's laughter, my grandchildren's healing, the ranch reclaimed from those who tried to steal it. "Grandpa, tell us a story?" Ivy asked. I smiled. "Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he understood everything about his family." I told them a carefully edited version about the heroic father held prisoner, and the brave grandfather who fought for truth and justice. Someday, they'd know all the details. Tonight, they needed hope. The stars emerged. Fireflies glowed. Family together. This was victory. This was everything. Looking back, I see a man who almost lost everything because he chose comfort over truth. Don't be like me. Don't ignore warning signs when someone you trust begins controlling the narrative. Don't wait 3 years to ask the hard questions. God gave us instincts for a reason. The unease I felt watching Laura smile without reaching her eyes. The wrongness of Ethan's sudden travels. I ignored those gifts because confronting them seemed too hard. That nearly cost me my son. Here's what these grandpa stories have taught me. Evil thrives when good people choose convenience over courage. When that package arrived at the farmer's market, God offered me a chance to fight. I could have dismissed it, called it a mistake, gone back to my comfortable lie. Instead, I chose the harder path and found my family on the other side. This story isn't unique. Right now, somewhere in America, another family is being torn apart by guardianship fraud, financial exploitation, or someone weaponizing the legal system. These grandpa stories must be told, heard, and shared. They carry lessons that could save lives. Your courage to speak up could make all the difference. God put you in your family for a purpose. Don't let fear silence you when something feels wrong. That's the heart of all grandpa stories worth telling. We fight for those we love. If this story moved you, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss another powerful narrative. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Together, we fight for truth.